Thank you, Ian. Thank you all for your welcome. Greg said that he's, to some people's surprise, is always optimistic at the beginning of the year. I generally find I'm optimistic all year round, not just at the beginning. It tends to last, and that tends to last because I have people like yourselves as my principal collaborators in the great work of evangelisation and education in our diocese. I thank you for all you achieved last year and that I know you're going to do in the year ahead, and for joining me today as we plan this year ahead. Last weekend, a 21-year-old man was king hit in Haymarket, and 8 more young men were taken to hospital unconscious after random, unprovoked attacks or drunken brawls outside various CBD venues. The media has been up in arms about these unprovoked coward punches that have claimed, it's said, 91 Australian lives since 2000. Including Thomas Kelly and Daniel Christie, a year and a half apart, but only metres from each other in King's Cross. As a result, Premier Barry O'Farrell has just announced a so-called battle plan to make our city safer. Among other things, the Premier's plan includes lockouts from 1:30 in the morning for new customers and no alcohol trade after 3 a.m. in certain CBD pubs and clubs, which I know will be a great disadvantage to many of you. Bottle shop closures from 10 p.m, mandatory minimum jail sentences for drug and alcohol-related offences, including an 8-year minimum for coward punch attacks involving alcohol or drugs. If coward punches are all the rage in the CBD, we have our own specialties out in the suburbs. In the last few weeks, there have been plenty of car chases and hoon crashes reported out our way. Homes in Arncliffe, Greenfield, Bankstown, Seven Hills and, as so often, Guildford have been sprayed with bullets. Young men in Ashcroft, Liverpool and Seven Hills have been shot in the legs. As Baz Luhrmann's updated Romeo plus Juliet, these shootings express an unending cycle of gang-related vengeance, but without the beautiful actors. I remember asking teachers at one of our primary schools what was different about their kids. And one thing they identified was that on Monday they often discuss whose families were affected by the past weekend's shootings. Usually, I hope, more as victims than as perpetrators. A fortnight ago, while on a morning walk along the Duck Creek that marks the border of our diocese, a man reported finding the headless body of a youth. With masterly understatement, the police told The Australian that while the body did in fact have its head attached, the number of gunshot wounds meant that they were treating the death as suspicious. Well, were I to trawl back through the past year instead of just through the past few weeks, I could have given you dozens more examples. But I'm sure you get the point. Violence, even if exaggerated by our bad news media, is real in our region and often involves young people, especially young men. As we approach the centenary of a war in which 10 million young men died and a whole generation was decimated, we might well wonder what progress we have made as a civilisation since the war to end all wars. And if we experience dis-ease at what is happening to and at the hands of our young people, we might well ask, what are the causes of this disease in our polity, and what can be done about it? First, we must beware a media-fuelled panic. Catholic education in the Diocese of Parramatta can give so many examples of very fine young people who individually and together tell a very different story. A story of learning achievement, youthful idealism, energy and hope for the future. These stories are gospel stories, that is, God's good news stories. And they may not make the nightly bulletins, but they are, in my estimation, a much greater part of the real story about Western Sydney youth than the shootings and coward punches. However, secondly, for the sake of their generation and for our own sake, as those charged with a large part of their education and formation, we need also to think about the whys and wherefores of the dark underbelly of contemporary youth culture and behaviour. One thing we might immediately realise is that we are not uniquely cursed. Ever since the first two youths, Cain and Abel, violence has been a constant in human history, and perhaps especially in the history of young men. Like poverty, we will not be able to eradicate it entirely this side of the apocalypse. No end of new funding strategies, innovative pedagogies, national curricula and the rest will eradicate all violence. And we're putting far too much on the backs of our school teachers and systems, or indeed on our police and legal systems, if we expect that we can fix human nature anytime soon. But thirdly, as Christians, we are called to be leaven in this world, and to help build the kingdom of God. A task about which I wrote in my recent pastoral letter, Thy Kingdom Come. We have a responsibility to our young people to help them escape the violence into which too many fall. So we must ponder what are the possible causes of this evil. The current fashion is to blame alcohol. I have no doubt that alcohol, as well as other drugs, especially amphetamines, fuel much of the fire, but the spark itself comes from elsewhere. Restricting licences, limiting operating club and pub hours, increasing the price of alcohol may well be sensible, but if this leaves the underlying problems unaddressed, then violence may simply be expressed elsewhere or in other ways. My suggestion is that we have to look at the downsides of free-range parenting and the abrogation of personal responsibility that have been commonplace since the 1960s in our culture. At the absence of parents, especially fathers, as good role models for boys and young men. At the failure to cultivate temperance and other virtues. and at the meaninglessness and value free for all and violence promoted in much of youth culture, and especially in gangs. Child psychologist Michael Carr-Gregg told the Sydney Morning Herald that he was increasingly seeing a new breed of extremely narcissistic, underfathered adolescent males. They displayed no respect for authority, little exposure to tradition or ritual, and few, if any, skills in anger management. A culture of self-indulgent thuggishness is being incubated, he said, primarily in broken families and fuelled by alcohol, drugs, and the normalisation of violence in popular culture. As with so many social problems, schools must bear the fallout. Fourthly, the focus on young men is important given the lethal effects of their brand of violence. But preloading and binge drinking are now epidemic amongst girls and young women also. The harms are considerable and the violence may be expressed in different ways, such as through the social media. In preparing for this talk, I was introduced to the brave new world of alcoholic drinks directed at girls and young women with names such as Girls' Night Out, Mommy Juice, Happy Bitch, Skinny Girl Vodka, Be Fresh, Be Luscious and Be Breezy. There are 3 Australian white wines for girls. Fifthly, though schools cannot provide quick fixes for every social problem, they can help. Schools can supply for some of the gaps in family and society and can make their own unique contribution for good or for ill. Since last we met, we have a new Pope. Pope Francis has been a real hit with many people, not least in the secular media and amongst non-Catholics and rather disconnected Catholics. His simple gestures of humility and mercy, his accessible preaching, his constant message about gospel joy, his emphasis on mission over maintenance and self-protection speak to many people of all backgrounds in terms of faith. I believe he has some important things to say to our present challenges in Evangelii Gaudium, his recent apostolic exhortation on the proclamation of the gospel in today's world, which I commend to your attention this year. The Pope recognises in that letter that many people, including young people who are officially Catholic or Christian, are living without the strength, light and consolation born of friendship with Jesus Christ, without a community of faith to support them, without meaning and a goal in life. He acknowledges that powerful forces in economy and society and powerful ideologies such as secularism, relativism, materialism and individualism have contributed to the breakdown of such vital cells as family, parish and local community, or to a decline in their influence. The abandonment of absolutes has left many young people rudderless amidst powerful currents competing for their attention, loyalty and dollars. Substance abuse, premarital sex and nihilistic behaviours are only symptomatic of the deeper void in many young hearts. The gospel offered by Catholic schools, families, parishes, and other evangelising forces can be therapy for such dis-ease in culture and society. As system leaders and educators, we have the exciting possibility of really helping students, and indeed families and young teachers, find answers to the challenges of our cultural situation and their own deepest questions and longings. I think the Church, including Catholic education, has been making this much more explicit in recent years. Instead of seeing Catholic schools as great secular schools with Catholic icing, increasingly we hear the Church saying that they are agents of the new evangelisation. And it is in that very project that they'll find themselves offering the education people most need. A very recent Vatican document on the Catholic school, available on the internet but not yet in hard copy, calls our schools builders of an alternative culture, the civilization of love. Pope Francis, in The Joy of the Gospel, puts it this way: Catholic schools, which always strive to join their work of education with the explicit proclamation of the Gospel, are a most valuable resource for the evangelisation of culture, even in those countries where hostile situations challenge us to greater creativity in our search for suitable methods. Our school teachers and leaders must realise that missionary activity still represents the greatest challenge for the Church, and that the mission field is not deepest, darkest Africa, but our own classrooms. I dream, says the Pope, of a missionary option. That is, a missionary impulse capable of transforming everything, so that the Church's customs, ways of doing things, times and schedules, language and structures can be suitably channelled for the evangelisation of today's world, rather than the Church's self-preservation. I prefer a church, he says, that is bruised, hurting and dirty because it's been out on the streets, rather than a church which is unhealthy from being confined and from clinging to its own security. If we are to be a missionary on the streets church, the Pope continues, then the language of our proclamation must always be faithful to the tradition we've received, but must also be contemporary and accessible. Our catechesis must begin with proclamation of the very basics of our faith, but must lead to a solid, profound, secure, meaningful and wisdom-filled formation. It must be fed in that interior space that is prayer, and must give Christian meaning and direction to all our busy activity. In other words, we're called to be what the Holy Father dubs missionary disciples. Missionary disciples to our teachers, and with our teachers to our students and beyond. Fully consistent with the Second Vatican Council's reminder to us of our priestly, royal and prophetic dignity as baptised Christians, the Pope argues that it's our baptismal right and responsibility to follow the path of missionary discipleship. In the new evangelisation, every Christian is challenged here and now to be actively engaged in evangelisation. If we commit ourselves as leaders with our staffs to the new evangelisation, if we commit to pronouncing the way, the truth and the life that is Jesus Christ to our young people, then we can hope for more for them than coward punches and mommy juice. Today we launch a new formation text for system leaders for 2014, Sherry Waddell's Forming Intentional Disciples. It's also been distributed to all our clergy, and Sherry has addressed them, and I would say inspired them, when she was last in Australia. You'll be provided with a user guide to assist you in your reading, reflection and prayer about this text. Ian Smith will talk us through this later, and Sherry will herself visit us in November. I encourage you to read the book closely and to pray about its implications for your own life and work. Consider how it might contribute to your own evangelical task of intentional discipleship and forming other intentional disciples who will be the therapy our culture and our young people need. Rather than provide you with a detailed analysis of the book, I'd like to reflect briefly on a striking question central to it. Crucial to Waddell's work is helping people discern their gifts, the gifts they have to offer to church and society. On one occasion, she was not making much headway in an interview with the president of a local Catholic women's group. So she asked her, "Could you briefly describe to me your lived relationship with God to this point in your life?" The woman's response floored her. "I don't have a relationship with God." Waddell was shocked to hear this from someone who was a leader in the Christian community. For without God, we can do nothing ultimately worthwhile as Christians. We will also, if we are without God, come across as phony to young people when we talk God, to young people who have highly sensitive authenticity antennae. More troubling to Waddell was that when she started asking this question routinely, she found that this response was not uncommon amongst professional Catholics. She found a massive gap between the Church's rich theology of the laity, of the lay vocation, and the way people working in the Church are actually living their lives. There's a danger here of what Popes Benedict and Francis have identified as bureaucratic Christians, who go through the motions, but whose apostolate is animated not by evangelism, but by a grey pragmatism. Working in the Church, especially as clergy with the cure of souls, or in education with the care of the young, is not simply a job we can pursue with a tired and hollow professionalism. We're here to bring Christ to young people and young people to Christ. Young people who live in a culture with many benefits, many positives, but also often devoid of meaning and desperate in their hearts for a relationship with Christ. Of course, as the aphorism I taught our young people at World Youth Day goes, nemo dat non quod habet. Which, being roughly translated, is you can't give what you ain't got. Nemo dat non quod habet. In his first encyclical, Deus Caritas Est, God is Love, Pope Benedict XVI said that the decision to be a Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty ideal, but the encounter with an event, a person, which gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction. Christ is that event, that person. To encounter him is to have an experience of salvation. And that is what we feel impelled to share in Catholic education. Like the parents of a newborn child who shower their friends and colleagues uninvited with photos of their new baby. Those who've encountered Christ are driven to share with others the love and peace that friendship brings. What kind of love would not feel the need to speak of the beloved, to point him out, to make him known, the Pope asks. If we don't feel an intense desire to share this love, we need to pray insistently that he will once more touch our hearts. We need to implore his grace daily, asking him to open our cold hearts and shake up our lukewarm, superficial existence. Like the Word of God, who receives his very being from the Father and his flesh from Mary, we must receive and then give. Give our all. I pray that this new text will assist you to be attentive to your own particular gifts and those of your colleagues and students. Intentional discipleship is not an optional extra for a Catholic system leader. It's part and parcel of being a missionary disciple. I found it interesting that Professor Carr Gregg, in his reflections on violence among some young men, is concerned that they display no respect for authority, little exposure to tradition or ritual, and few, if any, skills in anger management. As Christians have always known, learning to temper emotions, strong emotions such as anger, and integrate desires with the rest of our personality. Growing in relationship with Christ and other people, and becoming an intentional disciple to others, requires a life of ritual, prayer, and community. I'm deeply grateful to all of you for the work you've done in implementing the Angelus throughout the diocese since we met last year. To recall daily a central mystery of our faith, the Incarnation, to seek to grow in relationship with him who is the Word made flesh and living among us, and to hand the busyness of our lives over to him is clearly good in itself. But to cultivate a habit of doing this in our young people, a habit of stop and be still with God and wonder, that habit is medicine for the disease of which I've spoken. That beautiful story we heard of the kindergarten child going through difficulties who found this so precious, this moment of stop and be still with God and wonder. That was a very beautiful, very moving story for me. And to all of you that have made that happen for our children, thank you. I'm advised that our RE review is winding to a close, and I'm looking forward excitedly to the final report. I'm very grateful to all of you who've contributed to that by giving your input in various ways. I anticipate a new burst of missionary zeal in that crucial element of Catholic education that will follow thereafter. Watch for this space. As you know, next month we will launch our new diocesan pastoral plan. Though there is an inspiring vision there, faith in our future is much more than a series of motherhood statements. It's full of practical ideas received from our leaders and especially from our people about how we might be better at being the Church of Jesus Christ in Western Sydney. This includes quite a number of actions for our school system, or jointly between our schools, parishes and other agencies. Greater collaboration and integration will be a real focus as we pursue the priorities of supporting family life, connecting better with the young, building upon our ethnic diversity, growing and supporting our laity and clergy in their vocations, and embracing a new evangelisation of our region. Our priests, principals and RECs forum in June will explore the implementation of the plan in greater detail as it relates to Catholic education. Suffice it to say, I encourage you to familiarise yourself with the material when it comes out and to consider how it might be useful to your work. Catholic youth gatherings are a key way for young people to encounter that ritual, prayer and community that Carr Gregg says they need. Research suggests that World Youth Day is highly successful, at least partly because it gives young people this experience of communal ritual. Much as I'd like to think that it's the Bishop's catecheses that really matter at World Youth Day, or the Pope's many speeches, or the extraordinary variety of festival events that are offered, or the prayer spaces and so on, the surveys find consistently that it's the principal liturgies that the young people find most rewarding. The rest are at best ways of underlining and enriching those experiences. The Stations of the Cross, the Vigil and the Final Mass reflect the young church all facing Christ in worship and adoration, praise and thanksgiving. Our pilgrimage to the Holy Land before Madrid, World Youth Day, and our service project in Lima before Rio World Youth Day were wonderful preludes to this, and I think opened our young people's hearts to what was still to come. It readied them for the extraordinary experience of being immersed in a Christian environment and being unabashedly Catholic for a week. And so they might grow deeper in their relationship with Christ and with their brothers and sisters. And so we might hear from a few of them.
My initial interest for wanting to be a part of World Youth Day stemmed from my passion for travel and my passion for the faith. So I figured I'm young, I'm Catholic, and I like to travel, and I put the three together and I ended up in South America.
I wanted to be a part of, and I wanted to experience the universal Catholic Church. I wanted to experience the young, the youthful, the exciting church, and I wanted to experience that with other young people who were just like me.
I encountered Christ in so many ways during World Youth Day. Just through the smiles of the people around me, their prayers, how they were praying, all in different ways, and some were just closing their eyes, some other were crying, and some other were dancing, singing or clapping, and through the people for sure.
The experience of meeting new people every single day, whether it be from our parish diocese, from our school community, from the Parramatta Diocese, the Sydney Diocese, or from other dioceses all around the world, that enabled me to truly experience Christ through the people, through God's children.
I felt him mainly in the little chapel during our extended stay in Lima, where we had an opportunity each night to be in his presence and kneeling in adoration before our Lord, and I think that's where I experienced him the most.
I remember looking around, and you could have heard a pin drop at that moment, and it was 3 million people proclaiming the same faith. And I just remember thinking to myself, you know, wow, Jesus is here, God is here with us, and He's always going to be with us. And He wants us to go and proclaim the good news.
Oh yeah, things changed after World Youth Day because I'm more aware of Christ with me every day. And after that experience, I would like now to learn more.
My experience at World Youth Day has given me this sense of appreciation for all the people around me, for people that are close to me, people that aren't close to me. It has made me feel that I am connected to a larger sense of community, and not just our own parish, not just our own school community, but people from all over the world. But in saying that, it does make me realise that Christ's work begins right here and right now.
I also learned to be loud about my faith beyond the festivities of World Youth Day, and we were called to make disciples of all nations, so I took that as a personal challenge, and I aim to share Christ with whoever I can.
We come back here and I think, look at all the things that I have, everything that I have access to. Why can't I go and do more? Why can't I go and be the hands and face of Jesus just through the simple things that I can do? Because we have that power.
Well, as we just saw, we will meet again in Krakow in 2016. I want lots of our kids there. It will make a huge difference to their lives. But I especially ask every school in our diocese to plan to send at least one young teacher to that great event. Because no matter how many of the kids we send, a young teacher coming back on fire with faith will have a much greater multiplier effect for our whole Catholic education world, our ecosystem, for our individual schools and our whole system. So I'd really ask you to make that your first target, to get a young teacher. If you can get 5 there, great. Might leave a bit of a hole in your staff, but I'm sure you can cover for it somehow. But we want the kids there, we want the students there for sure, we want those who've left school there for sure, but young teachers are, I think, a special target for us. It can do so much for them, and they in turn will do for the rest of for our kids and our system. So please put that in your list of things you're planning for right now, perhaps saving for right now too. The highly successful Australian Catholic Youth Festival in Melbourne last month was another opportunity for a number of our students to encounter Christ. That's going to play again. The 116 mainly Year 10 students, 26 teachers, and a similar number of post-school youth have described their experience as amazing, the experience of a lifetime, awakening and redemptive. Our diocese, and especially our school system, can be very proud of its concerted efforts to give our young people opportunities through such festivals of faith and such immersion experiences to become intentional missionary disciples themselves and to inspire others likewise. Which brings me to my conclusion. Last year I framed my address around 3 films, and some of you may have been disappointed by the lack of film reviews in this year's talk. Though Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet received an honourable mention, and I've just shown you one of Parramatta's own films of its World Youth Day teachers. But so let me conclude with a third film, a more recent one, The Railway Man, directed by Jonathan Tibleski and starring Colin Firth, Jeremy Irvin, Nicole Kidman and Hiroyuki Sanada. Irvin and Firth play the younger and older Eric Lomax, one of the 45,000 Allied soldiers captured by the Japanese at the fall of Singapore, what Churchill described as the greatest military disaster in the history of the British Empire. Lomax undertook the forced march to Changi Prison and was set to work on the infamous Thai-Burma Railway. During his time in Changi, he was tortured. Years later, still suffering what we would call now post-traumatic stress, Lomax nurses himself to sleep each night with vengeful thoughts of making one of his captors, Tagashi Nagase, beg and scream as he painfully tortures and kills him. Coward punches would have been too good for his Japanese captor. In an attempt to let go of a lifetime of bitterness and hate, Lomax returns to confront Nagase, and with the help of his wife and best friend. He goes back, not knowing what he'll find or what it might do for him. But he knows that sometime the hating has to stop, to quote him. Sometimes the hating has to stop. The film is a realistic and powerful story of violence, forgiveness, and reconciliation. It shows the Christian answer to the culture of the coward punch, an example of Christ and Pope Francis's invitation into the infinite mercy of God. Now, I'll leave it to you, if you can bear to watch it, to make what you will of this real-life story. But one way or another, it's that sort of dramatic impact that we know Christ can have in our young people's lives and on our surrounding culture if we let him, if we join him, if we tell his good news in our day. Thank you.
suggestion, but
Who are you?
my name is Anne Prendergast from St Margaret Mary's at Maryland.
Hi.
My husband was at World Youth Day, and I have had some experiences with his recollections of the amazing experiences it had on the youth that he took with him, and he was also at the Melbourne Youth Festival. My question is, can we offer something? I know it would be a very downgraded version, but for our senior primary children, for them to be able to see what it means to be a universal church, to have some sort of mini festival for our 4, 5 and 6 students. That would be something I think could get them to have some sort of mini experience of what it means to be part of that universal church.
What a splendid idea. Would your school like to put it on for the diocese? I mean, seriously, we know that people have done research on vocations, and that includes priestly and religious vocations, but also vocations to marriage, to family life, to professions such as teaching, that kids it's at stages like year 5 and year 9 where they're really grappling with who am I going to be, what am I going to be, and we probably focus more year 9, 10, 11 end, thinking about that with them. And you're quite right to say 4, 5 and 6, they're already making some important decisions about who they're going to be and what's going to matter to them. And so that is a very interesting challenge, which I have never heard before, and I always think I'm going to have heard it all before. Yes, let's talk about that. I should warn you, I was at the meeting of the Australian Catholic Youth Council yesterday doing their not post-mortem but post-vivum on the festival in Melbourne, and the pressure is on for Parramatta to be the next host. I don't know what I'm going to do, but be warned. So we could have the 10, 11, 12s and post schools as well, but that shouldn't stop us doing a local one instead of or as well as the national one for a younger group. It's well worth talking about. Thank you.
Bishop Anthony Brenda from Holy Family Limited. I just want to say thank you. I have no question for you. We all know how important our roles are with young people in our schools, and it's very hard sometimes because it is tough from day to day. But hearing you talk about how important it is for us to pass on the faith, particularly through the liturgies we give them the opportunity to take part in, really gives me personally, and I think those around me at the table, and I think everybody here, inspiration as we start a new year. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, sister.
Hi, I'm Jenny from Holy Cross. I was also saying, thinking to thank you because it's very topical, the one-hit punch, and I know it's been a discussion. I've been having a lot of family and friends discussing what is happening in the community, and I thank you for bringing that to our collective attention because I believe it is an important issue in our community.
Sue Walsh, Bishop Anthony, the Angelus last year, the challenge you gave us to ritualise and implement in our schools, it certainly was a challenge at the beginning of the year. And I think that what I want to say is that it's really important as our bishop that you give that leadership. I know you already do, but the importance of aligning something that is really important to all of our dioceses. When you think about 44,000 students praying at 12 o'clock, it's pretty impressive. And I suppose what I'm saying to you, the importance of that leadership and the partnership, working together with the parishes and the schools and the system about making sure that those things that are important in our church are practiced and implemented. And I actually look to you with all of us for that leadership. And I think that's a really important, what you've given to us in Parramatta. I just think it's such a critical practice, as you said, children stopping, praying with their teachers. And I look to what will be as we grow that in our diocese.
Well, thank you, Sue. It's very confirming. Those of you that know me a bit better know I'm a bit known amongst the Australian bishops for always bragging about Parramatta, and as soon as I start and say that, some of them will say, now what's he going to say about why Parramatta's better? And when I started talking with some of them about my plan to do this, I heard from a number of people, including brother bishops, also other people in education in other dioceses, it just won't happen. People won't get behind it. The schools won't get behind it. There'll be resistance. People just so hate their perfect lesson plan being interrupted in any way, or they like to invent their own prayers in their own way at their own times and don't want to have a particular form as well. Or I had all sorts of reasons why it wouldn't work. And it seems to me it has worked wonderfully, and that's because of you. I mean, you decided to back me. You could have decided to resist me. You could have decided to do it with gritted teeth and make it really boring until it kind of just died out. Or there are a million and one ways you could have responded that wouldn't have been so confirming for me, but much more importantly, so life-giving for those little ones, and that they are stopping and being still with God and wondering is because of you and your staff, and so thank you again.
Bishop Anthony John DeCourcy, and this isn't Dorothy thinks so. 2 years ago when you spoke to us about new evangelisation, you talked about that being as the evangelisation of those who were in name Christian or in name Catholic, but had lost connection with the Church. This year you've talked about the high and positive profile that our new Pope has with many who have probably lost that connection. How do we go about leveraging that high and positive profile in the work of new evangelisation that we do?
Very good. I think there's a providence in our having this Pope at this time. I loved our last two popes, and they fed my mind and my heart. Of course, I mean, there were two more before that, but I was a little and didn't really have much idea about popes. They're the two I've known, John Paul and Benedict, and they've hugely contributed to my understanding and my love for all things Christian, and above all for our Lord. But we know the last few years, and it continues to be for our church with the Royal Commission, it's been a gruelling time. It's been a time where we've really taken some hits, and deservedly, given some of the failures and neglects over the years. And I think that left a lot of people, I think, perhaps a bit demoralised, a bit unconfident, that do we have something beautiful to offer after all, or is it all a sham? And I think he's come at just the right time to say, look, we've got to let go of the stuff that's not important, focus on what is, and there is something really beautiful here to offer the world and to offer our young people amongst them. And that has spoken undoubtedly to people who are just holding on by the skin of their teeth to calling themselves Christian or Catholic, and to people who perhaps have even stopped some time ago because of their disillusioned about this or that, or they've been hurt by this or that. And he keeps inviting people back and keeps opening wide the arms of Christ, the arms of the Church to people. I think that offers us a posture in all we're doing, that we can go into our work in the school, our work with our own staff, some of whom may also be feeling some of that demoralisation, some of our own families, and certainly some of our kids, the disconnection. And with that same posture of arms wide open, focusing on what really matters and having a sense of the joy of all this, the beauty of all this. There is something wonderful to offer. And it's part of why in my thinking for today and what's so topical at the moment, and people look grasping for solutions, and they grasp for things like a new harder law, but it strikes me we need something deeper if we're really going to confront this thing in the human heart and in youth culture at the moment. And I think the new Pope is offering us that. Christ is offering us that, but offering it through him. And so we don't just quote him and look to him and kind of clap. We say, well, what does it say to the way I am to my staff and to my students? Can I be like him, with arms wide open and with the joy of the gospel radiating on my heart? And so when that little kid comes up to take over the stage when he was giving his speech, and which must happen to you, some of you, from time to time or very often, that you delight in that like he did, and let Christ beam through them as well as through you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Anthony, and I support all the positive comments that people have spoken to you about in terms of how you've motivated us and helped us forward something of a common vision here this morning. I like the way you tried to give some cultural analysis at the beginning of the society that's impinging on our young people, and we all know that that's very complex. Sometimes I like to think of it in terms of it's a very extroverted society that we live in. It's all out there. It's like, look at me, and that. And I was thinking our challenge is a little bit about restoring some balance to that, to create a more introverted society. And I like the way Pope Francis spoke about prayer as really nurturing that inner space. And I just thought I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank all our teachers, particularly the RECs who are here today, on the way they're embarking on the process of Christian meditation and really trying to grow a culture of reflective prayer in the schools. Like we talk about the Angelus, and that's a wonderful common practice, as Sue said. It's very moving to think that we stop all together and pray, that whole sense of solidarity. But I think unless it's known from within, the young people won't carry it after the school structures have left them. So that's why I just really commend and hope we can nurture a lot more that meditative prayer. Would you mind commenting on that a little bit and how we can go forward on that so that we can create a more reflective society?
I suggested that I think one of the benefits of the Angelus is hopefully cultivating a habit in our young people of just stopping and being still sometimes, because they're in a world of noise and go and fill every moment with, if there's any space, get on your smartphone and fill it with typing or looking or there's no stop and be still unless you're unconscious because of substances or too much dancing or whatever. And if in addition to giving them a way of praying or some things to think about, the Angelus and lots of other things we do around prayer and ritual with our young people is cultivating in them just a sense you've got to make time and space for quiet, to stop, to think what it's all for. And then we're teaching them things like meditation. We're teaching them different ways of praying, and there are so many different in our very rich traditions that we have in the church. But that we've shown them we value that stopping, that when life isn't just about production and consumption, it isn't just about keeping the economy going, but that other things matter. We talk about work-life balance, whatever, but it's those other things that matter, and perhaps matter more because they're going to be what inspire and enable and re-energise all the rest. It's a way of signalling that to them, even to, as we saw, a 5-year-old who's thinks you have to stop your interview or whatever else you're doing and just think about God for a moment. And that's a wonderful thing if we get them into that habit, even if the particular prayer form passes with time as they move into others, or in some cases that may be the one they're still praying when they're 90. But one way or another, the important thing is we've conveyed what I described as the be still with God and wonder time.
Thank you, Bishop Anthony. Kevin from St Margaret Mary's, who are holding a Faith Festival for Stage 3 apparently this year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm new to the school, which is even better. Just to bring connection from today back to a staff that I've never met or worked with, I thought one of the questions you had up on the slide from the text, I thought I'd use you as an opportunity for a bit of a fill-in. So could you briefly describe your lived relationship with God to this point in your life, just so that when I ask that question to the staff, I have a reference point. Bishop Anthony said this.
Look, there's lots of smart answers I could give to that. You could go to my website and just look at all my homilies for the last 20-something years, which in one way or another, I think those of us that have the privilege of being able to talk God's stuff a bit more explicitly, which means all of us, compared to a lot of the population who, if they said that word at work, everyone would say, oh, fanatic, quickly hide. But we get to be a bit more open about our hearts and our spirit. It means, in fact, we've probably had lots of chances at different times to answer that question, which a lot of other people probably are not challenged to or don't have the space to. I think I probably would have given different answers to that question at different times in my life. It would be, sometimes I would have said it's been, especially in some experiences I've had of the liturgy. Like I can remember one time when I was in Poland with about 200 of my Dominican brothers all singing the Divine Office together, and I really felt like I was in heaven, like I was there already. I was, take me now, this is all I want. And it was a very precious moment. But I've had lots of different kinds of moments, I think, where I have known God's closeness to me. I have known that Christ really did die for my salvation. He wants me to be with God and the saints forever. And one of those is when I see and I get sentimental about, when I see things like our little video and get sentimental about that lives are being touched, that people are being changed by what we do. And I think, it is worth being a bishop after all. Sometimes a good thing happens, and I know that's God. It's not just a grand plan and some faithful collaborators. There's grace there. There's relationship with Him there.